Well, joining me now to discuss these stories, particularly the one with regards to Ukraine extraditing a Russian soldier, is Marek Laskovich, an international affairs analyst, will focus on that particular subject. Good to have you. It's been a minute, Dr. Marek. What are the implications of Ukraine's decision to put a Russian soldier on trial for war crimes, and how might this affect international relations between, Ukraine, Russia, and the West?
Well, from Ukraine's point of view, it's a PR coup because it first of all has another person for war crimes trials, and is by sending it to Lithuania also brings Lithuania in on these various atrocities which the Russians are alleged to have committed. Also, the very fact that Russian soldiers being put on trial for war crimes is, of course, very heartening for many in the West. However, it has a negative side in that, first of all, it shows that Lithuania is now taking more part in this war. And secondly, and this is the key one, the war crimes trials are, if you like, a pistol pointed against Russia, because not only has President Putin himself been, of course, accused of war crimes, but other Russians too. And the implication here is that if Russia loses, it will suffer grievously, which in turn means that Russia cannot afford to lose the war, and so makes any sort of peace process even more difficult to achieve.
Thing is, Dr. Marek, how does the principle of universal jurisdiction apply in this case, and what are the potential consequences for international law?
Well, there's no such thing as universal jurisdiction. What you mean is that any state within its boundaries has jurisdiction, and it can sign up in a cooperative way to be part of a more international order, though not every nation signs up to these, Israel being a case in point. And therefore, the jurisdiction aspect of it is quite simply that where, if you like, who is the victor, who wins? Because here, were Russia to lose, and were President Putin to be arrested, then that would be a matter, if you like, of winning the war, and the jurisdiction aspect comes in on it, whether Russia has signed any treaties allowing for it. But what really the Ukrainians are after is to point out to the Russians that they intend to pursue the Russians in as far as possible on the legal front as well as on the military front.
So, I mean, how might Russia respond to this trial, and what potential military or diplomatic, actions could be taken, knowing that Putin is Putin?
Yes, this is the unfortunate aspect of it all. If we're very lucky, Russia will probably ignore this, and the actual soldier will be duly tried and found acquitted or guilty, as the case may be. On the other hand, Russia may use this as a PR point. First of all, to remind all Russians that they're now in it together and they must win. And if this is the case, then the question is quite what Russia's action would be, whether it would be confined solely to Ukraine, or whether they might not finally take the plunge and go for the Suwalki Gap, which they've gone for before, because the Suwalki Gap is quite interesting. It runs through Poland, but also Lithuania is a border country, and that therefore, were they to go for this, that would be a military response to this present situation, which, I please point out, according to my analysis, might well involve nuclear bombs.
So what role might the International Criminal Court, the ICC, play in this situation, and how can Russia respond to ICC?
Russia probably will not respond to the ICC. It's simply ignoring the ICC. The ICC has, strictly speaking, no way of enforcing its decisions. What role the ICJ may play is, again, precisely the same. These international bodies only function if the persons or the nations concerned fully support and take part and participate. It follows logically that weak nations, and here, of course, many Africans have been caught in this, unfortunately or fortunately have to obey, whereas other nations, for example, Russia or Israel, simply ignore everything. And so therefore, I don't see much of a role for them in the sense that Russia per se will not be interested, though of course Lithuania will benefit perhaps from being able to try this Russian soldier.
So, Dr. Marek, how might this trial affect the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, and what potential opportunities or challenges might arise from this development?
If Russia chooses to ignore it all, have no effect. And after all, the Russians are profligate with their soldiers' lives and reputations, and so therefore this is the most likely option. But they may seize upon this as a PR point. As I stated, the Suwalki Gap is one they have mentioned before. It runs next to Lithuania, not just through Poland, and they might take this as further reason to act now against neighboring countries like Poland to um, cope with their animosity towards Russia. If so, they would go also for nuclear attack because conventional isn't working very well in Ukraine, and there are no more constraints because Russia sees Ukraine as part of Russian territory, as the Ukrainians as Russians, but no such compunction would supply to Poland, and therefore, from that point of view, the situation may take a turn for the worse. However, I assume that the most likely outcome is that Russia will simply ignore this.
Finally, before I let you go, how might this whole trial affect the relationship between Russia and the West, and what potential consequences might arise for global security and stability? Plus, what's the role that international organizations such as the United Nations play in responding to situations like this?
Well, in terms of international relations, it's unquestionably a note for the worse. Um, Trump has, of course, President Trump has announced nuclear testing, which is a further minor escalation. We also have the problem that, of course, as you pointed out earlier, the Pokrovsk is being encircled by the Russians. And so from this, and of course, the Russian-Venezuelan situation is interesting because it has been mooted that President Trump is planning some sort of more military engagement with Venezuela. On the whole, it could turn out to be a move for the worse, with further destabilization, leading to more conflict in the world, especially centered around Poland and Lithuania, in which case it would go most probably nuclear, as I stated in my book, unless some action is taken, such as forming a buffer state. The UN has no real role in this because simply it is being ignored by the major actors, let's just say Russia in this case. And therefore, the key question is, what will Russia make of this step by Ukraine and Lithuania? And will it seize upon this as a PR opportunity?
Dr. Laskovich, for the time and joining us from London.